Good morning, friends. Let me say hello to my dog. He always wants to get in on the action as soon as we start these things. Come here, lay down. Um, Today's talk is another talk based on the Therigatha, which is um, a recounting, a recording of 73 awakened nuns uh, during the original Sangha, during the Buddhist Sangha. Um, all of these poems are remarkable in how, including this one. This is called Upacala defeats Mara. They're remarkable in how applicable these are still uh, to what's occurring in the world. The Buddha described his Eightfold Path as a timeless path, which is sometimes misinterpreted to mean that it is a path that extends and has been around. Uh, Taught by different Buddhas through the ages, going back into the endless path, into the endless future. And that's not what the Buddha meant by timeless. He simply meant that it is always applicable. And usually when he's making that statement, he remarks, and this is included in the Nagara Sutta, how he clarifies that statement, that this path that he taught for his entire teaching career was a path that was never heard before. And it's just the modern adaptations beginning all the way back with the Mahasangika sect, which started to emerge about 100 years after the Buddhist teaching, that wanted to change and alter and adapt and accommodate the original Dhamma to fit their own views. And that still continues today. There's people that insist that the worldly events are so much different than they were 2,600 years ago, that the Four Noble Truths, including the Eightfold Path, are no longer relevant. And of course, the Buddha didn't, the problem of suffering and ignorance of Four Noble Truths was not something that was due to worldly events that caused this. It rather was the opposite. It is individual ignorance of Four Noble Truths that results in all the difficulties in the world. So to say that these teachings and these timeless teachings are no longer relevant because of worldly events is a complete deluded view. It's seeing things from the a completely opposite way of what's really occurring, which is ultimately the expression of individual ignorance on a global scale. Again, it's a timeless path. And so in this sutta, the nun Upacala, the awakened nun, refers to the Mara. And of course, Mara is metaphor for a confused and deluded mind rooted in ignorance of Four Noble Truths. Metaphor was often used during the Buddhist teaching career, and still is useful today when we understand what this means. In other words, we can get lost in the fact that Mara is like some Buddhist type of Lucifer, a devil, working on us, and then we immediately lose sight that it's the way that we think, and our thinking rooted in ignorance of Four Noble Truths. It's the problem, not some imaginary evil being, disincarnate evil being that's working on us. There's an article on the website called Mara and Metaphor that's useful in explaining that. I won't get into it here. Upacala says, established in mindfulness, having developed right view. Of course, I'd like to stop right there. When we discussed this briefly last night, right view is both an entry point into the Dhamma, into the Eightfold Path, meaning an acceptance that the way that I'm thinking, the views that I'm holding, seem to be causing me stress. And so let me find another way of thinking, which is exactly what the Buddha went through. When you read the Nagara Sutta, he talks about the feedback loop of self-referential views stuck in a ongoing thinking that is ignorant of Four Noble Truths. There's no way to escape that unless you have an Eightfold Path. And ultimately, right view, as the Buddha described it, is a view that has a profound and penetrative understanding of suffering, that understands the origination of suffering, that has experienced the cessation of suffering, and has fully developed the Eightfold Path leading to the cessation of suffering. So let me start again. I interrupted it. Upacala, establishing mindfulness, having developed right view, I have entered the peaceful state of which those ignorant of Four Noble Truths cannot enter. And now Mara, her own mind, is creating one last challenge. Mara, ignore those truths and enjoy the sensual pleasures, delight in sensual pleasures, and don't later burn with regret. That last line is just such a good example of clinging. Don't burn with regret. In other words, that we might actually miss something in life if we're not constantly grasping after objects, events, people, and ideas to continually satisfy our five senses and our thinking, that sixth sense, thinking rooted in ignorance of Four Noble Truths. Don't later burn with regret. And Upacala counters. One who gives birth to ignorance, clinging to impermanence, clinging to ignorant views of self, suffers and then suffers more. What she's referring to, of course, there is the three marks of existence, which is the three marks of existence are the three subjects that the Buddha teaches we are to gain insight into. And the reason why I say that and continue to make a point of it is that there's the modern insight movement, and this is spilled over just into the general mindfulness movement, that we should be looking to gain insight into everything that occurs, and washing the dishes and walking the dog and the birds flying. And of course, we should be mindfully aware of what's occurring moment by moment, but not be distracted by seeing something special and become enamored with the objects, events, views, and ideas that occur, and then lose sight of gaining the specific insight into the three marks of existence, something that is often lost today. Upacala continues, the rightly self-awakened one has defeated Mara, and he taught me his Dhamma for the cessation of ignorance, for the cessation of fabrications. He taught me the Eightfold Path for final cessation of suffering. I heard the great teacher's words, and I am delighted in his bidding, to do his bidding. Insight into the three marks is known. I have done what must be done. Craving has ended. Darkness overcome. Know this, evil one, referring to Mara. You have been defeated. What a marvelous poem. And when you think about, then it's important to humanize these, realize that this is a human being recounting her awakening following the teachings of another human being, an awakened human being, Siddhartha Gautama, the Buddha. And there's so much included in this short poem, and in all of these poems. That's why I've taken to teach, most of my Wednesdays, going back maybe 6 or 7 weeks, and going forward for at least a few more weeks, are focused just on these poems of the awakened monks and nuns, because they contain so much Dhamma in such a short and concise presentation. And the remarkable insight, but the practical insight that is presented is truly remarkable, including what Upacala teaches here. That she defeated Mara, she overcame her own mind rooted in ignorance of Four Noble Truths and prone to confusion, deluded thinking, and ongoing suffering, by simply taking to the Dhamma as it's presented, and now awakening. And again, going back to how I started this talk, and it's something that I try to be clear on continually, is that these teachings are truly timeless teachings. The conditions of the world are are remarkably similar, and I might even say exactly the same as they were 2,600 years ago. Probably the only real difference is the emergence of immediate global communication, meaning we're aware and usually painfully so of all the difficulties and the global difficulties facing all of humanity. But the root cause of all of the difficulties is not particular subjects such as nuclear proliferation or poverty or racism. Pick one. Homophobia. You could go take a long list of things that would be distracting if we only focused on individual issues, and we would miss the underlying cause of all of these difficulties in the world are rooted in ignorance of Four Noble Truths. And the timeless path that the Buddha taught 2,600 years ago is the solution to that ignorance. So again, thank you for joining me today on my Wednesday video podcast, I guess I should call it. And I hope to see you again next week. If you find benefit from this talk, please support this talk and future talks with your donation at becoming-buddha.com. Thank you. Peace.